Every leader has bad days. Most pretend they don't. This is the show where leaders stop pretending and start learning. Welcome to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast, where leaders pull back the curtain on decisions they cringe about, runes they misread, and the failures that shaped everything after. Real leaders, real mistakes, real lessons. Because you can't become a great leader without a few bad days. Welcome back to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast, the show where we stop pretending leadership is easy, we stop pretending that leaders are perfect, and we start learning real lessons from those moments that didn't go as we had planned. I am your host, Dr. Matt Paden, and I am super excited to have today's guest with me. He is someone who understands high-stakes leadership better than most. Today, our guest is Lieutenant Colonel retired Scott Mann, a former U.S. Army Green Beret who served multiple tours around the world, including Afghanistan, Colombia, Peru, and now he is a warrior storyteller. He's the founder of Rooftop Leadership and the Scott Mann Leadership Academy. He's also the host of the Scott Mann podcast. He's authored several really impactful books, including his newest, which we'll talk about today, which I received just a couple of days ago and have already dove into a lot of this, The Generosity of Scars, how your stories of struggle can change lives, especially your own. Wonderful book. He's also written Nobody is Coming to Save You and the New York Times bestseller, Operation Pineapple Express. Scott, welcome to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Matt. I'm coming at you from Lake Ouachita, Arkansas, and you'll probably see some activity going on behind me here, but this is a week that we get away every year with our kiddos, and I got kids in the Army, federal law enforcement, and fire department, and they all come off the road, and we all come together and just we did a version of what you're talking about last night around the fire pit, talking about the rough days and what we learned from them. And I appreciate you and what you do, man. It's a great message.
Well, thank you very much. Let me say this at the very beginning. Appreciate your service. Thank you for your service to our country. And as you just said, it sounds like you have others who are serving our country in a variety of contexts in your family. So thank you to you and your family. And I hope you have a great time away with them this week. Appreciate you in the middle of all that, jumping in with us to talk about some things and some lessons that we can learn from those moments that are not always the best, not always the most exciting, not always easy to think about. But I'd love for you to jump in with us here and maybe tell us about a leadership decision. Okay, a leadership decision that, as you think back, it still bothers you. You still cringe about it. You still wish maybe you had done it a little differently. Let's start there. Maybe you can tell us a story about a leadership moment that you still cringe about.
Yeah, I don't. I guess there's plenty of them. There's no shortage of them. Certainly in the military. I'd say probably the one that comes to mind, so close to Memorial Day, was the loss of a teammate, Alan Johnson, on a mission in South Central Afghanistan during a big operation called Nam Dong, and Alan and his team were inserted into a high mountain area to go after a set of targets that had already killed Americans, and we really wanted and needed these guys removed from the battlefield, and Alan and his team were selected to basically be inserted and run these guys down, and they did that, and they did it extremely well, and they found themselves in hot pursuit of these guys. They got down in some very rocky terrain and lost communications, which was never a good thing, and then found themselves pinned down in an ambush. They had basically kind of run into an ambush and were pinned down, and Alan broke through all of that and put down suppressive fire and enough so that his teammates could withdraw. And then he was shot, mortally wounded, as he made his exfil after ensuring that his teammates were out. He was a very junior guy on the team compared to the other guys on the team, but yet he made this extraordinary move to free his teammates up so they could break contact. And then of course there was the task of carrying Alan out, which his teammates did. And for me, like Memorial, this was years ago. This was 2005 when this happened, the spring of 2005. But there isn't a day that goes by where you, as like me as the mission commander, you don't think about that, and you wonder, like, what are his kids doing on Memorial Day? They don't have their dad. They don't have him around. His wife doesn't have him around, and you wonder, could I have been faster? Could I have been more resourceful? Could I have been more creative? Could I have been more responsive? Was there another way to do that mission? Could we have used, operational fires instead of a team? And it's one of those things that, like, I don't suspect I'll ever not have those thoughts and those questionings of, I don't say that I cringe, really. It's kind of a dull ache. But you question your decisions from the outset of the mission conception all the way through the responsiveness, and you just over and over, like, it's never ends, and you're constantly reviewing it in your mind. And to the point, like, I'll have to just stop myself, or my wife Monty will just have to say, hey, like, that's not what Alan would want you doing. It's not what he would, he would not want you doing that. And then I'm able to kind of come out of it. But for me, and that's not the only one, unfortunately, there's more than one of those, but that's what I go back to when I think about, leadership decisions that you question. And again, I don't necessarily cringe, Matt, but I feel it just, it's this questioning of one's own leadership decisions and the process, and could I have done this and could I have done that, and it's a never ending cycle that I guess I'll carry to the grave with me.
Yeah, I appreciate so much your candor and the story there that, unfortunately, as you mentioned, probably is representative of, there's others, other stories like that. I don't even like the word cringe as I think about that question. There are some people who in leadership treat moments in their company, moments in the existence or the history of their business or whatever it may be, as life and death, and then there's moments that really are. So thank you for sharing that, and may we all recognize the reality of our context, and just understand fully what's at stake in some of these conversations. When
But I feel like
Go ahead.
I feel like I owe you a cringeworthy one. I can give you one too, real quick. Is when we were in Afghanistan in 2010, and we were doing a mission called Village Stability Operations, and I was a lieutenant colonel at that time. I was a pretty senior Green Beret, and Green Berets, what we do differently than Navy SEALs and Army Rangers is they're very good at coming in on a target. They take the target down, and then they come off the target very quickly. They usually do the mission themselves. Delta Force, Rangers, SEALs. Whereas Green Berets work by, with, and through indigenous populations. We are advisors, so we'll go in with 12 and come out with 1,200, like you saw in the movie 12 Strong. And so our bread and butter is relationships. Our bread and butter is rapport building. Our bread and butter is social capital. Building trust where there is none, and then mobilizing those relationships to get on top of the enemy from the inside out. It's a very unconventional approach, but we pride ourselves on our relationship acumen, our interpersonal skills. And I remember we were engaging this one village elder that was a very tough cookie, and I was going out to kind of maybe lend some support to that. This was a village elder we really needed to work with in a very dynamic, contentious area. And the captain there was a very good captain. He was he was junior to me, but he was the captain on the ground, where I was the program manager in and out of these places, fly in, fly out. And I'd kind of, I think, maybe even started to believe my own press a little bit, because I was pretty good at these negotiations, and I was pretty good at, strategic influence. And I'd been doing this a long time, and flew into this area, and, started meeting with this elder, and I remember I was pushing pretty hard for him to work with us, and um, the elder kind of excused himself for a second. And I said to Rob, I said, Rob, we need to kind of get moving on this. What do you think we need to do next? He said, we need to keep drinking the tea, sir. Slow down. And I was like, I just got schooled by a captain on the very thing that I should be teaching him more of. And it was very cringeworthy because I'd allowed myself to get so programmatic like we do as leaders. Next thing, what's the next thing? Let's go, let's go. And I had forgotten that you build the trust first, you build the rapport first, then you talk about whatever you're going to talk about. And I violated kind of a golden rule of special forces right in front of a junior officer that really I should have been modeling that for. And thank goodness he was competent enough to and had enough moral courage to say, hey, sir, slow down here. Like, you're the one violating this right now. We need to focus on what's important, which is this relationship. So there's a cringeworthy one for you.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great story. So you have studied leadership. You've led people into really high stress situations and high stakes contexts. You've also written about it. You think about it. You're coaching and teaching and training people on it now. What's something you used to think was great leadership, but now you look back and you say, "Oh, that wasn't good leadership at all." But you used to think it was something that was really powerful and important, but now you look back and you just think about it differently.
I think the whole kind of performative nature of leadership, and the way that in the military you were evaluated against your peers, and it was this performance oriented thing where you were given these standards and you achieved those standards, and then if you met exceeded the standards, you were ranked above your peers. And it became, at the time, you couldn't help but get a little bit caught up in it, I suspect, because um, it was the system, right? And so not only was I rated that way, but I rated others that way, and so it became. I don't know that I ever liked it, but it was just, you accepted it. And once I got out of the military and I founded my own business, founded my own nonprofit, I realized that what it did was it created, Matt, this zero defect mentality where you're afraid to mess up, you're afraid to make a mistake, you're afraid to put yourself out there and take a chance and really try to take risk. And it became a model for risk aversion, right? So and I see it now in the military, I see it now in government service, I see it everywhere, and I don't like it. I don't like the model. I think that anything that is so performance based that you just basically dismiss risk from your vocabulary, or struggle, because you don't want to be perceived as weak, or you don't want to be perceived as flawed, when in reality, for leaders, I mean, we are flawed. We're as flawed or more flawed than anybody else. And I really love now this whole, that's why I love the idea of your podcast and your platform, is this notion that it all starts with struggle. I mean, Daniel Cole in the Little Book of Talent says that struggle is a biological necessity. Uh, so I think that's probably that's the biggest example I could think of. And it's not just in the military, is it? I mean, it's corporate America. It's anything with the government where you're held to this, frankly, just an unreachable standard. And there's no consideration or integration of struggle and our flaws as the baseline for how we lead. It's all performative, and it's false. And I think it just creates this really, really perverse culture of zero defect and no failure, which is, of course, not possible.
Right. And as we often talk about with different clients and groups we speak with in our work, when you're faking it, the only person you're really fooling is yourself.
100%. Everybody knows.
Your team already knows your
Oh,
challenges and your weaknesses. They know, they see it. They're waiting for you to catch up and admit it.
that's right. That's 100% right. And they know you better than you know yourself in many cases, because they're out there in the trenches doing it. And The best leaders I had in the military, Matt, honestly, were the ones that would say things like, "Hey boys, I'm not sure what we do next year. I got nothing. What do you guys think?" And those were the guys that you would run through walls for, because they understood that they had limitations, and now that's not to say that I do think there is this thing that, fear is contagious, but I think leadership is too. I do think there is a time as leaders when we have to model um, a higher standard. We have to model, even when we're afraid, when we're skeptical. Um, it's not that we don't. It's not that we don't feel fear, or we feel reluctance, or we feel self consciousness, but what we do with it has to be different than others. I think how we manage our energy in those moments and how we show up. We cannot, fear is contagious. And so if you allow fear to permeate your body and your existence, or you allow tension before you get up in front of people at a sales meeting to overwhelm your nervous system, then you look like you don't trust yourself. And that is very difficult for people in a high stakes situation to follow you if you look like you don't trust yourself. So it's a tough needle to thread, because you want to be real and authentic. But I also believe you got to be careful that you don't turn it into a therapy session in front of your people. That's not helpful either.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to put it. That. So, in your life and in your career, you have been exposed to many different leaders. Some that you probably worked for, some that you work with now, even in a variety of settings and contexts. As I mentioned, what's a behavior that you've recognized in at least from your perspective, a bad leader that you promised yourself, I will never repeat what I just saw them do? You have any moments like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a few, and I'm sure you do too. And I'm
Yeah.
sure most people engaged in this podcast do as well. Um, and I like the way you frame that, because my father, he was a wildland firefighter, Rex Mann. He used to always tell me that you can learn as much or more from a bad leader as you can a good one, and just how not to show up. Um, I guess the one I hate to say it, but I would say the leadership, unfortunately, most recently, after I got out of the military, within the government, though, on the political side, on the military side, and on the State Department side, of the abandonment of our allies in Afghanistan in 2021, when the decision was made to pull out of Afghanistan. Which, okay, that's a political decision. I respect that, but the way in which we did it, where within a 24 to 48 hour, we wholesale abandoned a 20-year ally and left them inside Afghanistan. These commandos, these special forces, these interpreters, these female ministers who were, courageously stepping into their role as leaders, as women, in a society that did not allow that. We left them to be executed, tortured, made to disappear. We did that with no regard for the outcome or the impact it would have on our veteran population, our Green Berets, and others who built 20 years of their life by advising these people and sticking with them, and never, never abandoning them. And the thing I'll end this with, Matt, is like, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, whether you were a Green Beret or not, we didn't fight that war alone. We fought it alongside our Iraqi partners. We fought it alongside our Afghan partners, and you were held to a very tough standard. It was called Shona Bashona in Afghanistan, which is Dari for shoulder to shoulder. And you were held to a standard. If you abandoned an ally on the battlefield, or if you, put yourself in an advantageous situation that excluded them, you could be held to, Uniform Code of Military Justice. You could be prosecuted for that. You could lose your career for that, or worse. And yet the very institutional leaders, I'm talking 4-star generals and politicians and State Department diplomats, the very people that held us to that standard for 20 years, when it became politically inconvenient, just went silent. and left an entire generation of veterans to try to rescue our allies with no assistance. That was the worst demonstration of institutional leadership I have seen in 30 years of leading men and women, both on and off the battlefield. It was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. So much so that I wrote a book about it. I wrote a play about it. It's been optioned for a movie, and I'm absolutely committed to illuminating that and talking about it until I die, because it cannot be repeated.
What an example. So, in your various contexts, another question: when you walk in the room or when you are working with a group of leaders, what's a leadership red flag for you, that when you walk in, or if you spend a few minutes or maybe it's a couple hours with a particular leader or a group of leaders, what's a red flag that you can spot almost instantly, but it really uh, makes you aware of what you're dealing with?
So I do a lot of consulting. I do a lot of work with senior leadership teams all over the world. And the first thing is, if I walk in that room and the leader's doing all the talking, if the leader's in there just talking nonstop and nobody else is talking, that's an indicator to me right there that you've got basically a totalitarianism going on of some kind. That's usually the first thing that pops in my mind. Another thing is if I go in a room pretty quick and everybody's phones are out and no one's talking to each other, they're just all on their phones waiting for the meeting to start. It's another one. And then if there's just an endless array of PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint is usually an indicator
Yes.
to me that you've over-indexed in the digital domain and you've lost the bubble on interpersonal connection. And so, and you're hiding behind data, stats, numbers, and the heartbeat has been lost. So those are three that just right out of the can jump out at me.
I appreciate those. Go back to that first one for just a second. I'm curious, when you are in the room and you realize that that one person seems to be the only one speaking, do you ever call them on that? How do you handle that in the moment when you're there to either observe, or maybe you're there to present and other things? But how do you handle that, or do you just kind of let it go?
I absolutely do. I think it's real important that if we're going to coach leaders, right? One of the first things that we need to do is we're going to coach leaders. My father taught me this. He was a great leadership coach, and he coached firefighters. But what he would always do, and I loved it, he would get permission from the very beginning. Like, if I'm going to coach you, let's talk about how I'm going to play and let's talk about how you're going to play, right? So you brought me in here to coach you, which means it doesn't mean that I'm better at leadership than you. It simply means that you're close to the problem. You're going to miss things because you can't see the forest for the trees. You're in it. So I assume you're bringing me in here because you want me to be that extra set of eyes for you, and you want me to tell you the truth. Is that true? Yes, that's true. Okay, cool. Then can we talk about what that looks like? Because here's how I like to do that. When I see something that is off, I want to make sure that I call it out as quickly as possible, but not interrupt the flow of your meetings. How would you like me to do that? And then we have a conversation around that. The key here, and then you arrive at a set of norms and standards for how you're going to coach. I put it in writing at that point. I'm like, if it's okay with you, I'm going to summarize this and get it back to you. And then I'll usually have that conversation with the senior leader and his senior leadership team. Now, I'll usually have it with the boss first, but then do I have permission to have this with your whole team too? And we have that conversation. Okay, I'm going to roll this up, and this is going to be how I operate with you guys for the next 6 months. And do I have everybody's, and I go down the line. Do I have your permission to do this? Do I have your permission? And once you get their permission to do that, and you've got norms and standards, people hate to violate their own rules. They hate it. And so now what I've done is I've obtained permission to interrupt. I've obtained permission to interject. I've obtained permission to coach when risk was low. Now I can implement it when the emotions are high. And if they pivot on me and they're like, whoa, no, and I'm like, hey, hold on now. Remember the rules we said, that I'm able to do this, and they'll be, oh yeah, okay, and I can true back to what we agreed upon. If you don't do that, what's going to happen is you'll end up becoming the bad guy. You become the guy that everybody rolls their eyes at. You become the guy that's interrupting the flow, and that how much longer is he here? So that's kind of how I come at it, and I found that, and I did it in the military. I do it in corporate America, and I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. I take the similar approach. So I love the idea of what you just said, taking care of the details when it's low stress or no stress. So when the stress arrives, you're ready to go. And it's just that preparedness piece that is so important.
We have a saying, Matt, that might translate very well in your world. Is we have a saying in special forces, because we go into these low trust, high risk places, and you're talking with this elder that's looking at you from a furrowed brow, and he's had 30 years, 40 years of exposure to conflict, from the Russians to you to the Taliban, and you're here in front of this guy, and he's got an AK-47 to his right and a cup of green tea to his left, and you just want the guy to pick up the green tea and have a conversation, and then another sip of green tea, and then until ultimately there is social capital, those tangible, intangible linkages in place that is binding between the two of you, whether that's friendship, loyalty, trust, rapport, whatever it is, any combination. That's what we're going for here. But that's not that different than everyday life, right? That's not that different than leadership in the world you and I live in. So we had a saying that was, you build trust when risk is low, and you leverage it when the stakes are high. And that is not unique to special forces. That is normally how humans operate. You never want to try to build trust in a crisis. You never want to try to build trust during COVID. You don't want to build trust during a recession. You want to build trust when the sun is shining, and you want to leverage that trust when the rains come. That's just
I
how
love
humans
that.
are.
I love that. That's so good. So you have probably in uh, your work experience had a leader that you followed that maybe in the moment or the moments or the season you were in, they may have made some of your work, I don't know, miserable, but you still learned lessons during the middle of that. Do you have any good stories about a moment where maybe there was a leader who made your work miserable, but you still found value in the lessons that you learned during that season?
Yeah, there was one of my commanders. He was a mentor of mine for years, off and on. Because special forces is a very small community, Matt, and there's only like 6,500 Green Berets out of 1.4 million in the military. So we're a very small community, and then within that you have 5 groups. And then I was, when you're a part of a group, you're regionally oriented, you have culture, language, so you don't really leave that group that much. Your leaders are, you're with each other pretty much your whole career. And so I had a boss. His name was Ed Reeder, and he and I worked under him in various capacities from the time I was a senior captain until I was a lieutenant colonel and I retired, and he was a 2-star general. And you know he was a massive guy. His father was a Vietnam War veteran, a paratrooper. Ed Reeder was iconic in special forces. He had fought in the El Salvador campaign, Just Cause, Afghanistan. I mean, like, this dude was just, and he was built like a silverback gorilla. I mean, like, in fact, his call sign was the silverback, and
Wow.
big fella, and just imposing figure. Um, and I was his operations officer on more than one occasion, and he just would ride me into the dirt, expectation wise, and you did not want to make him angry, because he would come at you with all 4 feet. And there was one occasion where we were going into Afghanistan on our second deployment, I think, and we were trying to get our mission statement right. And in the military, again, I think this is universal. I think every mission statement should be this way. But in the military, your mission statement is very perfect, very, very simple: task and purpose, what and why. That's it. That's so. But we were establishing our mission statement for the whole deployment that was coming up, and there was a lot of change happening in the country. We'd had democratic elections. The Afghans were starting to assert themselves more. So, you needed a new mission statement that was different than the group before, and even different when we had been there before. So he took a handful of us, his trusted leaders, and he put us in a room, and he's like, come up with a mission statement. And then what happens is you brief that mission statement back to the commander. We briefed it back. No, I don't like it. Go back again. He'd give a little guidance. We'd work on it several more hours. Come back. Nope, that's still not there. And sometimes he wouldn't give us any guidance. Just keep working. And this went on for days. I mean, days. And we still got a whole plan to write. And I'm getting angry because I'm thinking we are not going to get the whole plan done, and finally he could sense my frustration, and he rather than landing on my chest cavity, he pulled me outside and he said, Scotty, he said, you guys are close. He goes, but listen, if the mission statement's wrong, the whole plan's wrong. If what you're going to do and why you're going to do it are not in alliance with my intent, then how's the plan going to be any good? The details won't matter because what and why are wrong. And I really was kind of embarrassed, honestly, at that point, because I was like, man, he's exactly right. And so we went back in, and we took a deep breath, and we kept going, and eventually we landed on a good mission statement, and it guided us through an 8-month deployment. But I never forgot that. In fact, I've done a lot of mission work. You've probably done the same, where you work with like leaders and you try to help them identify their purpose and their mission. And it's hard. And when you put people in a room and you have really candid conversations about who we are and why we do what we do, that is probably one of the hardest conversations you'll ever have. I mean, the fat and hair is flying everywhere. But what I learned from that was that's necessary. That's just absolutely necessary. And if you cut corners on that, guaranteed your plan will fail, and you will shortchange the people that you serve because your what and why are wrong. So that's probably the biggest one I could think of lesson wise that just has stayed with me to this day, because it's such a hard conversation to have, but so necessary.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It ties directly into one of our core principles: know where you're going and why. You got to know why, and
You do,
that is such a
you
great
do,
reminder.
you do,
Such a
Matt.
great
And
reminder.
here's a little bit on the science side of that too. As Green Berets, we study human nature and the human condition. And um, one of the things in my book, Generosity of Scars, and even my book before that, Nobody's Coming to Save You, that I talk a lot about is what we call the human operating system, like what our primal brain and how we navigate the world. And one of the things that Dr. Ivan Tyrrell says in his work, The Human Givens, is that we are meaning seeking, meaning assigning creatures. We have a mandate. Our brain has a mandate to make sense of the world. Your associates, your clients, your employees, your children, ourselves. We all have this make sense mandate that we're trying to make sense of the world. And as leaders, one of the biggest responsibilities we have, and one of the greatest services we can do to the people we serve, to our children, to the travel ball team we coach, is to help people make sense of things. As leaders, that's our job, is to help people make sense of things, because that's what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to make sense of things. And in today's business world and the trust recession and the complex environments we live in, if you're not helping your people make sense of the ambiguity and the complexity, then what are we doing as leaders? Like, what are we really doing if we're not helping our people make sense of things?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the best ways to help in sense making is storytelling.
Oh man, you got that right.
And as a warrior storyteller, as I described you at the opening, you've done a great job already in this show, and so just thrilled. I've got a couple more questions for you. One, I suspect that when you think about your current leadership style, you didn't arrive there overnight. So there may be more than one pathway to this current leadership style, especially. And I'm always fascinated when I talk to people who have military experience, because the leadership structure and the performative nature that you were describing earlier is often comes up. But you have a leadership style of your own. When you think about the journey to get there, what was there a mistake somewhere along the way that helped shape your leadership, your current leadership style?
I think so. Yeah, I think probably what I would say was, well, there's my current leadership style is informed by two things really: connecting like your life depends on it, which is, origins all the way beyond special forces, like to my father who taught me that as a wildland firefighter. He was very much on that. So this idea of human connection and then deep purpose. My dad calls it leaving tracks. And I think the mistake for me, the human connection piece I've always valued, and while I've made mistakes in that over time, I think I've always stayed true to that. Where I think I really made a fundamental mistake in my leadership style was around purpose. And I lost my purpose when I came out of the military. I lost my identity. I went into a very, very dark place in my transition from the military in 2013. I had not dealt with a lot of the things that come with combat, moral injury, survivor's guilt, some post-traumatic stress. And I did not deal with those things. I just came out of the military and tried to become what society wanted me to become, or what I thought it wanted me to become. Everything was fine on the outside. I had a job. I was writing a book. My kids were still at home. I was married. My marriage was still intact, but I was falling apart on the inside. And I allowed myself to almost, I was suicidal. I almost took my life, and I allowed myself to get to that depth of depression and just darkness because I lost my purpose. I lost my identity. I did not lead myself. I did not care for myself. I did not respond to the warning signs that I was being given, and I became isolated. And when I became isolated, I lost my meaning. I lost my purpose, and I almost lost my life. And it was actually, of all things, storytelling that brought me back into the light, allowed me to make sense of things that didn't make sense, and it saved me. And then it gave me a vehicle by which to bridge the civil military gap into other places and show up relevant to other people. But that mistake nearly killed me. And so now I'm very adamant about, with corporate leaders, senior, I don't care who they are. I stood in a closet with a pistol under my chin. I don't care who it is and how senior they are. If I see what we call the allostatic load, which is a cumulative load of stress, if I see it in their eyes, or I can smell it on people, I'm going to say something to them. I'm going to say something to them like, how are you doing? When's the last time you actually did some recovery? What's going on? Right? I don't care, because I know how quickly it can happen. And we're losing our senior leaders in droves right now. Maybe not always to suicide, but to all ranges of mental health and cumulative stress. And, we're not any good to anybody if we make it through all this stuff we make it through, get to the finish line, and then collapse in a heap at our kid's birthday party or our grandkids' birthday party. So that was the big mistake for me. I almost let it kill me, but it became, as you often say on your podcast, it became a pivotal moment for me to actually parlay it into something good.
Such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, a lot of people who listen to our podcast as we're tracking some of this, and as I hear from people, are fairly new in leadership, young professionals, emerging professionals. Maybe they're leading teams for the first time. Maybe some who have been leading teams for a long time will appreciate this question as well. What would you tell somebody who is in a leadership role about failure? Or what do you tell people as you proactively go into organizations and help train and coach and teach? What do you tell leaders about failure?
I'm very honest about it. I always go to the science of it, like, first, because as a Green Beret, we look at the human nature of how we lead, and we lead in some very rough places. And so if we get it wrong, people die. But I think for all of us, it comes down to understanding the human operating system, understanding your own nature, understanding the nature of those you serve. And let's just face it, struggle is, you're either in it, you just left it, or you're going back into it. And that's not just you, that's the people you lead, that's your children, that's your boss, that's the president of the United States. No one is, in fact, again, read the little book of talent and listen to how Daniel Coyle talks about high performers. And he says that when the brain is faced with new information, whether that's a loss of a parent or, having to learn how to shoot a jump shot, the brain has to build new neural pathways to make sense of the new challenge. And that clunky, awful feeling that we experience during that is struggle. And struggle, therefore, is not something that happens to a few of us. It's a biological necessity. Well, failure is nothing more than the manifestation of the brain trying to make sense of things. Failures are just episodic manifestations of the brain moving through a process from struggle to resolution. That's what's happening. So failure is literally, it's a milestone along the path to resolution. So it's necessary. It's grist for the mill as a leader. It's actually Joseph Campbell in the Hero with a Thousand Faces. He says the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, and that treasure is failure, is struggle. Because if we can take that and repurpose it into the service of others, oftentimes through the stories that we tell, then you become relatable to people. You people locate themselves in your stories and they go, wow, I had no idea that he had been through that. I had no idea. She has actually been through what I've been through. And the armor comes off and people get ready to listen and they start to, your failure as a young associate in the job that you're now sharing with this young employee who just screwed up, they've located themselves in your story and they're now autobiographically listening. They're processing their own lived experience in the safety of your story. And the learning is accelerated, it's crystallized. And guess what? They now feel reciprocity towards you as a leader. They feel a reciprocal loyalty to you. They will run through walls for you. So, man, you got to have it. Like, and if you deny failure, if you deny struggle and don't integrate it into how you lead, not only will you have a gap in the people that you lead, I think they trust you less. I think you'll actually lose trust.
I love that. Last week, I spoke to a group of small business owners, very small business owners who were in the process of either beginning to hire their first managers or had just hired their first managers. And we were talking about a lot of different things. One of the things that came up was the tension that emerges during the middle of that transition between letting go and handing off, and I'm in control. I'm not. What if it goes wrong? There's that tension. And what I told him was one of the things I told him was the tension is the transition. It's not. It's not going wrong. It's going right. You have to have the tension. You have to have something to persevere through to get to the other side. You have to agitate. You have to walk through some things to get to the other side. And I think that's what you just described as well.
It's so true, man. You're right. You're absolutely right. Tension in that sense is necessary. Struggle to resolution is the pattern that humans have navigated this world for hundreds of thousands of years. And if you try to just take the struggle out and you go right to the resolution, I'll ask anybody listening to this. Have you ever sat in the audience and someone walked out on stage and they're going to tell you like their journey, right? They're going to explain, they're going to give you a motivational speech. They walk out and the first thing they do is start bragging about what they've done. And then they tell you the 3 ways to be great, like what they've done. Are you interested in that? Does that resonate with you? Right? Do you feel anything like reciprocal toward that person versus someone who walks out and they talk about their upbringing and what they went through as a kid and what they learned along the way. And they're actually talking about stuff that you can tell is not easy for them. And then they say, let me tell you what I learned along the way. Man, you're leaning in, you're right there with them. You can't look away from them. You don't even remember that you own a cell phone at that point. That's available to all of us in every situation, not just on the stage.
That is such a good segue to talk about. I'm going to show this to those watching this. Your new book, The Generosity of Scars. Uh, what a what a great idea. What a great thought. But I am certain that there's a story behind the book, a story that motivated you to write the book. Tell us a little bit about the book. I think it's a wonderfully powerful leadership concept, similar to even the premise for this show, right? There are
Yes.
things that did not go well that we have learned from and can absolutely change the trajectory of our life and our leadership and the way we try to navigate all things. So tell us a little bit about the book and what you're excited about as it has so much potential to make a difference in the world.
Well, thanks, Matt. You know how there's like so many. Remember in the war on terror post 9/11, there were so many military men and women that came out that had, they were snipers, they were special operators, and they did all these Herculean things, and then they parlayed that into a speaking career or a coaching career, and it's amazing. Like, well, I did none of that. Like, I came out of the military and I had a very dark transition, very difficult, very embarrassing. I almost took my life, and it became one of the ugliest, most embarrassing moments of my life. In fact, I didn't even tell my family and my children, my wife, that I had been suicidal until 2019, and I almost took my life in 2015. I was so dark. But what did happen was that a mentor of mine got me connected with storytelling as a modality, an alternative modality for healing myself. I went to several storytelling workshops, and I found that just by telling the story of my guys and that I served with, I could, storytelling has these properties that's been around for thousands of years. When we tell stories and we get real, it's a sense making tool. Our brain works in metaphor, it works in narrative. And so it actually helped me fill in the gaps for a lot of things I was feeling survivor's guilt about, moral injury. And I actually started to make sense of things that hadn't made sense. And I really liked it. But more importantly, Matt, in a not long after that, I was in New York City with a veteran transition event. And I talk about this in the book, but a buddy of mine, James, an iconic special operator, confided in me on a break that he was thinking about checking out. And in a panic, I was terrified. I didn't know what to say. I blurted out my standing in a closet with a pistol, and I had not told anybody, not even my wife. And I could feel his distant stare kind of come back, and he was now focused on me in the middle of that Manhattan traffic. He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "You're not alone, bro." And I could just tell that he was with me, and we were reconnected, and we went and got something to eat, and it brought him back to me. Like, that most embarrassing scar, that struggle, had been repurposed into something that served him. And today, he's not only is he healthy, he's very active and overcoming veteran suicide. And that was a pivotal moment for me, Matt, when I thought, man, okay, like, not only has storytelling helped me make sense of things that don't make sense and heal myself, but now I just used it in a real world moment where that actually allowed him to locate himself in my story. And what I learned later was that when we take our scars, our struggles, and we repurpose them through stories, what happens is your struggle, that moment that you don't want to tell others, that you don't want to tell yourself, where you have to take some armor off and really be relatable to your teenager about addiction, or your associate about a mistake that they made or you made. What happens is this thing called narrative transportation, where immediately we are transported into the story of the other person. And we've all experienced this, where now we are literally feeling what they're feeling. We're smelling the air as they describe it. And then we start to autobiographically listen. We start to process our own lived experience in the safety of their story. My father's battle with cancer now becomes your sister's battle with cancer, or maybe your own battle with cancer, or, man, I hope I don't get cancer. And people are processing their own lived experience in the safety of your story. And that's what this book is all about. It's all about, how do we take our struggles and repurpose them into stories that serve other people, from the stage, in one-on-one sales calls, in talking with your children, in coaching. And it doesn't just tell you how to design those stories, but it also helps you with the embodiment and the presentation of it. If you have to give a PowerPoint pitch, if you have to get on and give a TED talk, how do you do that fully embodied? And the last thing I'll say on it, Matt, is I became obsessed over this. I've done 3 TED Talks. I've coached dozens of TED speakers, hundreds of keynotes. I have been on CNN, Fox. I've written a New York Times bestseller book, all to get better at storytelling. And to complete my midlife crisis, I've written 2 plays and learned how to act at age 50. And I put all of that into this book to help people, no matter what you do for a living, this book will help you be a better storyteller in the key moments of your life. And this is how you distinguish yourself in this realm of AI and trust recession that we live in.
Yeah. Well, you are speaking my language. 15 years ago, Scott, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on storytelling as a strategy for leading change.
How about
You've
that?
mentioned sense making. You're the only person I don't think anybody ever read it, which is not uncommon for a dissertation, but the idea that storytelling allows us to make sense of the world, to frame the things that are going on around us, and then on the other side, we get to re-story the future. We get to think about a new story, and you have done that in your work. You've done it in this book. It's a great read. I cannot wait to see the movie one day that you described earlier. Man, I just appreciate you so much. This has been so much fun, and I just am grateful for the conversation today. Thank you, first of all, again, for your service
Yeah.
to our country,
Yeah.
both
Thank you.
officially as a Green Beret, but even post retirement, you're still serving your country well because you're working with people and are helping to make a difference around the world. And so I thank you for that. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for reminding us that leadership is not about perfection, it's about connection, which I think you said earlier is just it's not transactional. Leadership's personal and relational. For everyone listening, if you want to go deeper, check out Scott's new book, The Generosity of Scars, and his work at Rooftop Leadership. And as always, please remember your bad days are not disqualifications. They're your greatest leadership training ground. So push through to the other side, persevere, and see what can happen, as Scott would say, when we learn from our scars
Yeah.
and as we move and grow forward. So thank you for listening today. Scott, thanks for being here. For all those that are listening, if this episode resonated with you, please like, share, download, and subscribe, and even review the Bad Days Leadership Podcast. We thank you for being here today, and we'll see you next time.